My house is in a small town on the outskirts of a small town in the outskirts of a smaller town. On October 1st, at 3 a.m., my phone rang. It showed my owl's number. When I answered, my owl said, "Standing in the park, I was wondering why a frisbee gets larger the closer it gets." Then it hit me. Then I hung up. I was sitting up in bed, with the phone in my hand. I was really confused. Why did my owl just call me and say that? And then, it hit me. Something smashed through my bedroom window and it hit me directly in the face. It was a frisbee. I lived in that same town as my owl did. I avoided my owl's street. When I drive by my owl's house, I always see my owl staring me down from the window. The frisbee started to resemble a face. The face slowly turned its eyes. The frisbee's eyes followed my movements as I shifted from side to side in my bed. The frisbee was completely expressionless. I froze. After a moment of being frozen, I reacted and I jumped out of my shattered window. I fell directly on my porch. When I got up, I tried to open the front door, but it was locked. Suddenly, I look up and I see my owl in my room looking out the shattered window. I yell to my owl, "Did you lock me out of my own house?" My owl was staring directly at me. Then my owl started to say something, and I couldn't understand him. Then I asked him again, but this time when I asked him, he told me, "Standing in the park, I was wondering why a frisbee gets larger the closer it gets." Then it hit me. Right after he said that, a frisbee hit me directly in my face. Then he flew out of the shattered window and went away. As he was flying away, he dropped something. I picked it up. It was my house key. I was so relieved. I walked up to my front door and unlocked it. As soon as I opened the door, I sat down on my couch and fell asleep. I woke up at 3 a.m. because I didn't want to miss the bus for work. For a number of reasons, I take the bus to and from work, and today was no exception. One of the reasons is that owl. He follows the bus at Mach speed and tries to smash every window, bashing into them 10 times in a row every second. So I've changed from taking 2 buses to just 20 and walking the rest of the way. It started off fine, but thanks to progressively worse situations culminating into what happened today, I'm rethinking my commute. The first time I saw him was this morning on my way to work. I had just gotten off the 5th bus and I was walking towards the crosswalk, passing small stores and parking areas as usual. I realized he was standing just a couple inches away from me, and he said, "Standing in the park, I was wondering why a frisbee gets larger the closer it gets." Then it hit me. As soon as he said that, a frisbee hit me directly on the side of my head and I passed out, falling directly onto the pavement. I woke up 5 hours later in the middle of the road with my owl staring at me with police surrounding me. There were police cars everywhere. My owl said to one of the officers, "Brush your teeth after every meal." This is brought to you by the American Dental Association. The officer looked at my owl with a very confused look. Then asked him what his name was. My owl said, "Don't spit in public." The officer started to look angry, then he looked at me and asked me what my owl's name was. I said, "I have no clue, I barely even know him, he's my neighbor, about 40 houses down from my house." The officer looked at my owl again, and asked him again for his name. My owl refused and asked the officer what his name was. The officer had enough, and called for backup. The officer told me to stay where I was and not to move. Right afterwards my owl said, "How is a laser beam similar to a goldfish? Neither one can whistle." Then my owl started to whistle really loud. Eventually, the officers' backup arrived and they started to talk about the owl. I heard one of the officers say that owl is definitely high or something. My owl started to scream. The officers looked surprised and one of them pulled their gun out and fired it in the air. Then my owl started yodeling. Soon enough the officers arrested my owl. I was taken to my house by the officers. After that whole experience I just went straight to bed. The next day I woke up hearing noises coming from my attic, mostly footsteps. I wasn't scared at first, but there was something different about it this time compared to my other weird encounters. The attic isn't accessible unless you unlock the lock, pull down the lock and unlock the lock, pull down a string and let the ladder come down. From there, it's pitch black and mostly full of boxes from when I moved. I walked up the stairs slowly. My flashlight was extremely bright. And from one beam it can light up one portion of the attic. There's 2 sections of the attic. When you get to the top of the stairs where it's open, there's a side room. I didn't know there was a side room until that day. I made my way through the boxes and other random things from other renters before us, and found the door. I opened it, and the smell was so strong I was gagging. At first I had a bad feeling that there was a dead body, but thankfully there wasn't. It was my owl. He was smoking weed, and the whole entire floor was covered in owl shit. When my owl saw me I said, "Why are you here?" He said, "This is my vacation time, not yours," then pushed me out and slammed the door in my face. I tried to open it but it was locked. I gave up and went down from the attic. Then I heard the doorbell ring. I went to my front door and opened it. It was the TV police. The TV police asked me, "Have you seen this owl before?" They handed me a poster with the owl on it. The poster said, "Mysterious owl creature wanted alive not dead. 1 penny if found." I handed the poster back to the TV police officer and said I have no clue who he is. The officer said, "Thank you for your time." I shut the door. And as soon as I turned around, my owl was smoking on the couch watching Seinfeld in my living room, and he looks at me and he says, "What's the deal with that?" and flew out my living room window, smashing the window as he flew out. After my owl left, I cleaned up the shattered glass and went to bed.